727. Welcome, Senator Linehan.
Good afternoon, Vice Chairman Van Gillern, and welcome committee. My name is Luann Linehan, L-O-U-A-N-N-L-I-N-E-H-A-N. I represent Legislative District 39, which is Elkhorn and Waterloo in Douglas County. Today, I'm here to introduce LB 727, which relates to affording sales and use taxes to certain organizations engaged in private-public projects. Current law provides an exemption for certain purchases by a nonprofit organization, which is party to an agreement with a governmental unit. Typically, this involves lease purchase and financing agreements. Those exemptions won't apply in some situations, which there are individuals here today to testify about. What this bill does is allows the governmental exemption to pass through to certain organizations when engaged in a public-private project. Many projects which a governmental entity may find important do not get completed due to funding. To complete these projects, a public-private partnership is formed through a contract or other means. From the private side, philanthropic funds can be donated to the project. This oftentimes involves large amounts of donations and significant expenditures, often which are made by the private side of the partnership, and because of how the current statute subjects those purposes to sales and use tax. LB 727 corrects this and allows for much needed relief in these projects and opens more opportunities for future projects for public benefit. I'm handing the page AM 361. Hopefully I am. AM 361 clarifies the original purpose of the bill and provides the governmental portion in whole or part to be paid with redevelopment funds. Again, there will be others and experts behind me to provide additional information about some projects, the legislation, and how this benefits all Nebraska by further encouraging more public-private partnerships. I ask you to support LB 727 and AM 361. I thank you, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. So I will be very frank that people behind me are more apt to be able to answer technical questions.
Noting that, are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you. We will welcome our proponent testimony. Afternoon.
Good afternoon, Vice Chairman Van Gillern, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Corby Gilbertson. It's spelled Korby Gilbertson. I'm appearing today as a registered lobbyist on behalf of the Community Information Trust in support of LB 727. I first want to thank Senator Linehan for working with us on this legislation, and it's my job to kind of explain how we got to the bill and how we got to the amendment. And as you can tell by the number of the bill, it was introduced rather late in this session, and we unfortunately did not have time to work out kinks before we had to get it turned in. So that's why there's an amendment. Senator Linehan touched on the purpose of this and the underlying statute that we have right now. So if you have a project is to a tax rate. Unfortunately, the current makeup of the statute doesn't quite fit this situation where nonprofit is actually doing the project and then handing it over to the city, not doing a lease purchase or any other type of financing agreement. Specific library system for the new library, and there are people behind me that can tell you a lot more details about the project specifically. So in the amendment AM 361, it states that if the funding from the governmental unit is paid in whole or in part with redevelopment bonds, and you have the public purpose for the purchases, that would trigger this allowance. So it's a very specific and limited opening to the sales and use tax statute. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you, Ms.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. I'm Rachel Jacobson, JACOBSON. I'm the president of Heritage Omaha. We are a nonprofit organization that builds community assets with the goal of making Omaha and the region a more dynamic and vibrant place to live. Heritage identifies substantial needs or opportunities with high community impact and supports the realization of viable and sustainable civic projects through philanthropy. So public libraries are about safe spaces and equitable access to information. Libraries all over the world have had to adapt to rapid change in an information landscape that continues to transform the way we live. And in response to those needs, Heritage in 2015 created DoSpace, which is a community technology library and digital workshop, and it's operated by Community Information Trust, which is the 501c3 that will raise the funds and manage the library project. DoSpace was designed to bridge the digital divide, and it has since served tens of thousands of Omahans by offering high-speed broadband computer access, technology classes from littles to seniors, and innovative services for entrepreneurs. Last year, Heritage, along with the Omaha Public Library, the Omaha Public Library Foundation, the City of Omaha, and DoSpace, announced a schematic design and public engagement phase to explore the possibility of the Central Public Library branch at the DoSpace site, which is on 72nd and Dodge, that would further OPL's mission of strengthening our communities by connecting people with ideas, information, and innovative services. The new Central Library will integrate DoSpace programming, centralize and modernize collections distribution, and provide much needed public space for partnerships and community connection. Yes, books, yes, physical collections, but also programs that address the digital divide and safe and adaptable, inclusive spaces for all community members. Last summer, the Omaha City Council unanimously approved $20 million in redevelopment bonds, and Heritage launched a fundraising campaign that, including the city's commitment, will fund the entirety of the capital costs for a new Central Public Library. Meanwhile, the nonprofit Community Information Trust intends to donate the property at 72nd and Dodge and the newly constructed library to the City of Omaha for OPL to operate upon completion. So CIT is under a binding agreement to transfer ownership of the new library to the city upon the library's completion. And therefore, purchases related to the new library building would be exempt. And all savings resulting in this change would be used towards the completion and enhancement of the Central Public Library project for the benefit of Douglas County and really the state and the region. So this vision for the Central Public Library is the result of the incredible philanthropic community of Nebraska, and it integrates many voices in response to diverse community needs. So there's a couple of emails in your inbox that got to you probably a little late from Rebecca Stavick, the CEO of CIT, and Laura Marley, the executive director of OPL. So, but they've been very involved with the creation of this. It should be a really exciting project for our state. So I really appreciate your consideration of this exemption. And thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? I just have one, Ms. Jacobson. Are there other projects that you're aware of that'll benefit from this? Or, I mean, obviously you're most familiar with the library project.
Jacqueline might know of more that, have redevelopment bond funding. This is the only one that I'm involved with that would benefit directly. So.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. Any other questions? Thank you for your testimony. Any other proponents? Okay.
Good afternoon, committee and Senator Von Gillern. My name is Jacqueline Morrison, spelled Morrison, and I am currently a Deputy Chief of Staff for Economic Development for Mayor Gene Stothert. I am here today on behalf of the City of Omaha as a proponent of LB 727. The City of Omaha is excited about our partnership with Community Information Trust to usher in the next generation of libraries for Omaha. We currently have 13 branches and are currently working to open our brand new downtown branch this spring. The City of Omaha is fully committed to supporting the development of the new central library and has committed $20 million to the project. This bill would allow the public and private dollars that have already been pledged to support the project to go even farther in providing services to the residents of Omaha and the citizens of Nebraska. The City of Omaha has been a partner in all phases of the development of this project and is fully prepared to take ownership of the library upon its completion. The need for this bill is twofold. First, it allows the city to leverage our strong public-private partnerships to continue to provide world-class public amenities and facilities to the residents of Omaha in conjunction with our philanthropic community. Through partnerships, we are able to continue to grow our city without adding additional tax burdens to our residents. Our most recent partnership success can be seen in the work that is being done on the Omaha riverfront, wherein philanthropy raised over $300 million for the renovation of the Jean Leahy Mall, the Lewis and Clark Landing, and the Heartland of America Park. Since its opening, the Jean Leahy Mall has had over 400,000 visitors, with 2 other parks slated to open this year. We anticipate the new central library will be equally as successful. Our partnership with CIT has been extreme, where we have the community and industry. The result is the revisioning of our library system that will serve generations of Nebraskans. The second benefit to this bill is that it gives the city flexibility to use existing funding sources to fund projects like the new central library. The city currently plans to use our existing redevelopment bond levy to fund the library. Since this use does not result in a new tax liability for the taxpayer, it does not require a public vote, as is required by current legislation. It is, however, voted on by our city. To continue be possible. For these reasons, we support LB 727, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions from the committee? Some question I asked earlier got thrown to you. Are there other projects that will benefit from this?
I don't know of any currently. We do have, so for instance, our downtown project, riverfront project, that's a partnership with Mecca, and so they have their own exemption. But if we were to do any future projects, it will allow us to use that redevelopment levy that we currently have, rather than having to take a project out to the voters for a new tax source.
Okay, very good. Thank you. All right. Thank you for your testimony today.
Thank you.
Any other proponents? Seeing none, are there any opponents that would like to speak regarding 727? Seeing none, any neutral testifiers? Seeing none, Senator Linehan, would you like to close? Senator Linehan waives closing, and we have no letters for the record regarding this bill, so we will close the hearing on 727.
LB 491. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Chairwoman Linehan and the Revenue Committee members. For the record, my name is Senator Brad Von Gillern, BRADVON, I represent District 4, which is parts of West Omaha and Elkhorn. This bill addresses the Nebraska Advantage Research and Development Act. The act was created in 2005 by the legislature. The program had a sunset at the end of 2022. I think this is a valuable act and that we need to put it back in place. Research and development programs help drive us forward. We have a number of representatives from those fields who will elaborate on what those innovations mean to the state and beyond. What the act does is establish two state tax credits of businesses incurring research and experimental expenditures. There are two paths for these credits. First, there's a 15% of the federal credit for private research and development projects. Secondly, or 35% of the federal credit for research and development projects in partnership with a Nebraska college or university. 491 also addresses some E-Verify compliance issues that need to be cleaned up. In 2009, the act was amended so that all businesses and firms claiming the credit would have to E-Verify every employee before becoming eligible. 491 retains those requirements, but establishes that businesses have 90 days upon hire to complete those checks. Previously, there was no time element, only saying that it had to be completed in a timely manner. On the note of E-Verify, the Chief Corporation has told me that this is an important piece for them. Also, Lindsay Corporation wanted to be here today for that specific piece as well. Unfortunately, they can't attend, but wanted to convey that this has been a challenge for them and feel the current timeline needs to be addressed. 491 would also remove the 20-year cap on the eligibility for the program. Under the previous R&D program, this cap on eligibility handcuffed established companies from being able to continue claiming these credits. I think it's advisable to allow companies to claim the credit for 20 years and beyond to engage in additional projects, and just a matter of continuity seems to make sense. Before I close, I want to mention a theme we keep hearing, that is keeping Nebraska competitive. The Platt Institute submitted a letter in support of the bill and notes the 2019 Growing the Good Life Blueprint Nebraska report that we have not kept pace with our peer states. Innovation is a key factor to that. We need policy that attracts and grows businesses and talent, and 491 is a part of that. You'll find in the handout a brief prepared by the Nebraska Chamber. I'm sorry, I've got handouts I forgot to give you. Thank you. With an overview of where Nebraska is with research and development. Some notable facts from that report, I point you to the return on investment, the ROI, the track record of the Nebraska Business Innovation Act, although that's not just R&D, as it contains prototyping and commercialization support. You'll get an idea of how vital these programs are. 1,600 jobs created from funded projects, average wages of $65,300 in 2022. A 10-to-1 gain in private funds committed to R&D and innovation projects and services. 12-to-1 gain in business revenue growth after grants were awarded, and $752 million in total annual economic impact. These figures speak for themselves. I'm happy to answer any questions, and you'll find some testifiers behind me that will answer some more specifics about this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much. First, we'll have proponents. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Senators. My name is Matthew Ottoman, spelled M-A-T-T-H-E-W, O-T-T-E-M-A-N-N. I'm here testifying on behalf of the Lincoln and Greater Omaha Chambers of Commerce in support of LB 491. I'm also a member of the Nebraska Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and I'm a shareholder with the McGrath North, Mullen and Kratz law firm in Omaha. LB 491 was drafted by myself and my partner, Nick Neiman, with input from the chambers and several of their members. We had a review of the Act's credits, and what it does is it incents companies who do business in Nebraska to conduct and promote development. And it does that by providing a refundable tax credit equal to a percentage of the company's research and development expenditures. In brief, LB 491, it renews the program so companies can begin to claim R&D credits through 2033. And continue their research activities in Nebraska. And third, it clarifies the Act's requirements to E-Verify new Nebraska employees. And I'll take a second just to kind of spend some more time on the E-Verify requirements. So currently, the Act has a number of ambiguities regarding E-Verify, in particular for the R&D credits. And the Department of Revenue has been interpreting the Act to have really a one strike and you're out policy regarding E-Verify. If a company would fail to E-Verify even one employee within 3 days of hire, that company would lose all of its R&D credits for that tax year. And that's true even if the employee has really nothing at all to do with research and development. So we've seen the Department of Revenue issue notices of deficiency for hundreds of thousands of dollars, where one employee may not have been verified or may not have been verified just within the 3-day period that the department has imposed. And that's true even though the company performed the research and development activities that the state wanted to incent and wanted to occur here. We've been approached then as attorneys to develop legal defenses and have developed a number of several legal defenses to the department's position. But we frankly don't think that's what the legislature had intended for this program. We think this was an incentive program. And as Nebraskans, frankly, we'd rather see the law clarified to what we think was intended for this program from day one. Therefore, LB 491 will modify the act to state that a company will not receive credits for the wages of any employee, a new Nebraska employee, that is engaged in research and development that is not e-verified. The period for this would be lengthened to 90 days, which we think is a more reasonable period that allows for companies and employees to correct any discrepancies that may arise under an e-verified check, and would allow for a longer period only if that was otherwise allowed under the e-verified program. In that respect, then, what we're trying to do is equalize the result with the other incentive programs. So the penalty for missing an employee would work like the other incentive programs, such as Nebraska Advantage Act or Nebraska Advantage Rural Development Act. In those programs, a company would lose incentives for each employee at a project that is not e-verified. And this will match that as well. You would lose incentives, lose your credits for employees who are engaged in research and development, new Nebraska employees who are not e-verified. So really, we're trying to equalize the result between this and the other incentive programs. We think this program is an outlier, and it should be clarified or change the statute.
Thank you. Other questions from anybody? Yes, Senator Bostar.
Thank you, Chair Linehan. Thank you, sir. Can you talk to me a little about why some of these firms are having trouble e-verifying employees?
Well, I think there's a number of firms who can come up and kind of testify a bit more as to what may be seen. But I'd say that oftentimes 3 days is a pretty short period. A lot of times you have HR people may be out. Just a number of things can happen within a 3-day period. And so when you're hiring hundreds or thousands of people, sometimes there can be one that doesn't get verified within a very short 3-day period, 3 business day period.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Bostar. Senator Cal.
Thank you, Senator Linehan. So when they do e-verify, why would they fail the e-verify program? How does that trigger?
Sure. So I'm not an e-verify expert, but I'll tell you what I know about the program. So it works through existing databases run by, I think, Department of Homeland Security and Social Security Administration. And so there can be a period if we're seeing some kind of a check that would come up, their name would be flagged. The employee has a certain amount of time to kind of go through and try to clean up that discrepancy. If it seemed like there may be some question as to whether they were eligible to work in Nebraska or not.
And you mentioned something about when you're going through hundreds or thousands of employees, are thousands of employees being put through the e-verify system from one company?
Well, I mean, we're hoping that Nebraska companies are hiring a number of employees, and we've certainly seen some of the larger, employers over a number of years hire hundreds or potentially thousands of people.
And the way it stands now, if one person is flagged and fails, then it takes it from all.
It's not just one person's flagged and failed. It would be one person doesn't get run through the system within just a couple of days of hire.
Thank you, Senator Cal. Are there other questions for the committee? I know you said this, but so under Imagine Nebraska, what is the situation with e-verify?
Sure. So at that point, if we had someone who maybe the e-verify wasn't done timely or wasn't done at all, we would lose incentives for that employee. In other words, we wouldn't get the compensation for hiring them, compensation credit for hiring them. They wouldn't count in the number of new employees.
So it's a huge difference.
So, it can be a big difference there. That's right. And this is a one strike and you're out. Effectively, you lose all your credits for the whole year if you have one person versus the other programs. You kind of lose the incentives you would get for that person, but you're not out kind of everything you've done for the good of the state, which we think is a real significant penalty that is probably not what the legislature was intending.
Okay. much. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you much.
You have green sheet? Okay, fine.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chairwoman Linehan and members of the Revenue Committee. For the record, my name is Daniel Duncan, D-A-N-I-E-L, D-U-N-C-A-N, and I am the soon-to-be retired Executive Director of the Nebraska Innovation Campus Development Corporation. And I'm appearing here today in an individual capacity in support of LB 491. The views I am sharing are my own and do not reflect the official position of the University of Nebraska system or the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. I want to thank Senator von Gillern for introducing this R&D tax credit reauthorization proposal to assist our innovation economy. As someone who has worked extensively in fostering our state's innovation and entrepreneurial ecosystem through the work we do at Nebraska Innovation Campus, the R&D tax credit in LB 491 is crucial to our ability to help encourage private sector companies to partner with universities or colleges in conducting research. The 35% credit for R&D done on a campus or facility owned by any university or college is a tool that we have encouraged partners at Nebraska Innovation Campus to utilize as they consider their business models and opportunities for growth through research and development. The importance of maintaining the state's R&D tax credit is also important for our overall economic development competitiveness. From my work with university research parks and innovation districts across the country, states that prioritize incentives and programs geared towards the innovation space have seen their corporate and academic R&D increase significantly, along with high-paying jobs and careers in STEM fields. While I am transitioning toward retirement, I still care deeply about Nebraska's economic development and the work Nebraska Innovation Campus will do in the future to help position our state. By extending the R&D tax credit in LB 491, I believe you will be fostering our innovation ecosystem as we continue to explore new opportunities in ag tech, pharmaceuticals, drug research, artificial intelligence, and robotics. Thank you again for your public service, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, sir. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you much. Are there other proponents? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chairperson Linehan and members of the Revenue Committee. My name is Rob Owen, R-O-B-O-W-E-N, and I'm the Executive Director of Bio Nebraska, a nonprofit trade association dedicated to supporting, promoting, and growing the biosciences in Nebraska. Bio Nebraska has over 100 member organizations across the state representing the human health, animal health, agriculture, renewable fuels, and industrial biotech sectors. Bio Nebraska members also include service providers and academic institutions, including Southeast Community College, Metropolitan Community College, and the University of Nebraska and its 4 campuses. I'm here today to provide Bio Nebraska strong support for LB 491 to renew the Nebraska Advantage Research and Development Act, and thank Senator von Gillern for his leadership on renewing the Research and Development Tax Credit. According to recent data, there are over 18,000 jobs in Nebraska associated with biosciences, with many of those jobs closely tied to the agriculture sector. The average wage for these jobs, $82,000. If you look at that compared to the average private sector job wages in Nebraska of $54,000, we can see that the biosciences are providing high quality, high wage jobs. And as a state, we should continue to find ways to invest in and grow the biosciences. As you can imagine, research and development is at the very core of the biosciences. If a company is to exist, grow, succeed, research and development results must be successful. New products are essential. Unfortunately, research and development is not cheap and may not garner the desired results. In my previous position as general counsel at Streck, a medical device company located in La Vista, which is a world leader in hematology control products and specialized blood collection tubes, there were instances where the research and development team work tirelessly for extended periods of times on projects. And in the end, the customer may decide not to move forward with that project, which is never good news. And more than likely, the time and money spent over that year or so is likely wasted. While I don't have figures for private sector bioscience R&D spending in Nebraska, I do have figures for academic institutions. In fiscal year 2020, the most recent figures I have, Nebraska's academic institutions spent $414 million on bioscience R&D, which amounts to roughly 76% of all academic R&D. And in there, biological and biomedical sciences had 155 million, health sciences 128 million, and agriculture 103 million make up that 414. So that's a significant amount of resources dedicated to research and development, and all essential to growing the biosciences in Nebraska. When I talk to BioNebraska members, the two biggest issues they are confronting are workforce shortages, which is not unique to biosciences, we're all seeing that, and finding capital to run their companies. With regard to capital, several years ago, Nebraska ranked 51st behind Wyoming and Puerto Rico in venture capital investments in the biosciences. 51st. Thanks to companies like Virtual Incision and Adjuvants Technologies, Nebraska now ranks in the mid-30s. Just to put a dollar amount on that, in 2021, there was roughly $55 million in bioscience venture capital investments in Nebraska. Now, it's not all bad news on the capital front. Nebraska does have a big advantage, and that's the cost of doing business. Maybe a $5 million investment into a bioscience company here could give that company a 3-year runway to operate, where that same $5 million may be 18 months in California or Boston. So that's the good news, but the bad news is they still need the funding, and they need it here in Nebraska. Workforce issues cannot be solved overnight, but providing capital and resources, while not easy, can be addressed quickly. Renewing the Nebraska Advantage Research and Development Act can go a long way to helping bioscience startups and established companies thrive in Nebraska. Not only does the R&D tax credit help with financial resources issues that exist, but also keeps Nebraska competitive with other states. Over 30 states, including Colorado, Iowa, Kansas, and Minnesota, offer research development tax credits. In fact, I believe Iowa's R&D tax credit is a straight direct refund and does not offset other paid taxes. Not renewing the tax credit will certainly put Nebraska at a competitive disadvantage, and most importantly, eliminate a financial resource for our companies that is much needed. If we want to keep bioscience companies in the state and attract companies to Nebraska, we need to be competitive in the issues that really count. We cannot let the R&D tax credit disappear. Again, bioscience jobs in Nebraska pay an average of $82,000 a year. We should do all that we can to grow the Nebraska biosciences. With that, I will be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Owen. Are there any questions from the committee? Senator Breezy.
Thank you, Chair Linehan. Thank you for your testimony here today. You said that you represent about 100 members.
Mm-hmm.
And how many of those members participate in the act?
That I know when I worked at Streck did take advantage of the R&D tax credit through the state.
Do you know how many of the folks that participate in this get tripped up by the E-Verify requirements?
I do not. That is not in my bailiwick.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Senator Breezy. Are there any other questions on the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much, Mr.
Thank you.
Other proponents? Good afternoon.
Good afternoone. Thank you for this opportunity to speak today. I'm Michael J. Boyle, M-I-C-H-A-E-L, J B-O-Y-L-E. I'm president of Kawasaki Motors here in Lincoln and represent also the Commerce today. In Lincoln, we have 3 divisions in our Lincoln plant. The Consumer Products Division makes vehicles such as vehicles and recreational vehicles and jet ski watercraft. Our Railcar Division makes subway and commuter rail cars for metropolitan transit authorities, typically on the East Coast. Our Aerospace Division makes commercial aircraft structures for Boeing aircraft. We employ about 2,700 people in the Lincoln facility. In Lincoln, Kawasaki conducts R&D in 2 different ways. In our world, we have R&D engineers that develop, design, and test new products on site in Lincoln. And by the way, if any of you are having any spare time, we're looking for R&D test writers for our new products. So you can fill out an application at KawasakiLincoln.com. In our world, new product is crucial in meeting rapidly changing customer demands. If we fail to develop new products, we will not survive as a company. Over the last several years, Kawasaki has been increasing new vehicle development to gain market share. By doing so, we've increased production and sales. And also by doing that, we've increased employment in our Lincoln plant. Every new vehicle that we introduce requires tens of millions of dollars in new production tooling and equipment. Because we cannot make all parts ourselves internally, we have over 1,000 U.S. business partners that supply us our plant parts and materials. Many are located within Nebraska. When we introduce new products and increase production, our plant and our 1,000 business partners must invest in additional equipment and manpower. The money we invest in product R&D pays for itself many times over. Our other R&D activities are related to designing and building new production processes, including automation. Kawasaki employs mechanical engineers and software developers to design and build the equipment and processes that manufacture our products. We compete with companies around the world, as do many manufacturers in Nebraska. In order to compete with lower wage countries, we must build products as efficiently as possible, which means adding automation. Automation is a second benefit in helping overcome the workforce shortages that a lot of us are seeing. Our company continues to develop new, more complex production systems to continually improve our competitiveness. Installing automation requires higher employee skills to operate and maintain them. We provide our teammates with training necessary to run the automation, increase their skills, responsibility, and wages. The investment in process R&D increases Kawasaki's revenue and raises the living standards of our staff. The proposed change to E-Verify requirements is very welcome. We frequently transfer Japanese staff to Lincoln. The Japanese staff are very important for conducting the transfer of technology from overseas Kawasaki companies to Lincoln and from Lincoln to our overseas global Kawasaki entities. This global sharing of technology is crucial to our operations. With the current employment processes for foreigners, it's very difficult to meet the current timely E-Verify reporting criteria. One misstep, as you've heard earlier, with the current E-Verify process can disqualify Kawasaki's R&D submissions. The new 90-day requirement will really help our situation. Kawasaki fully supports LB 491. Without R&D, our plant could not survive. In our opinion, R&D investment generates substantially higher levels of revenue. R&D increases employee opportunity for skills growth and to raise their standard of living. And R&D is necessary for a vital economy and leads to a better world. Thank you, and I entertain any questions.
Thank you very much. Other questions from the committee? I have one.
Sure.
How does E-Verify work with somebody who's from Japan?
We still have to go through the E-Verify process because they become an employee of our Lincoln facility. So the international requirements take a little additional time and effort. So the 3 days is really, really difficult for us to get that done.
And if they're employed in Lincoln, they pay Nebraska income tax?
Yes.
Thank you. Senator Albright.
Thank you, Chair Linehan. Have you been penalized for?
No, it's been close.
Okay.
Yeah, but
Just check.
we've been nervous a couple of times. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Albright. Any other questions? Senator Cal.
How much do you get per year in the tax credits? What does that amount look like for you?
For us, in fiscal 21, which ended in March of 2022, we earned credits for $26 million worth of R&D. What that meant was a tax credit from Nebraska, about $54,000.
There any questions? I'm sorry. That's not Cal.
No, yes, that is.
Thank you, Senator Cal. Senator Albright.
Just one more question. How do I fill out a paper? Test out.
KawasakiLincoln.com. Come on down.
Thank you, Senator Albright. Field trip, I see coming.
That's right. Senator Bostar.
Thank you, Chair Linehan. Thank you, sir. Just, you talked about your employees coming over from Japan to work here in Nebraska. When they do that, approximately how long do they stay?
Anywhere from 3 to 5 years.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Senator Bostar. Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there other proponents? Are there any other proponents? Are there any opponents? Is there anyone wanting to testify in a neutral position? Senator Von Gillern, would you like to close?
Well, thank you to those who testified and added some real life stories to what we're trying to do here. Sometimes we get hung up in the numbers and the legalese about it, but this is really about jobs, and it's about I kind of drew a little linear graph on my piece of paper here. It's about some high paying, some well-paid jobs, engineers and bioscience, but it's also about trade jobs, because this is a tax credit that's used by as was spoken by Mr. Boyle, by Kawasaki. They employ a lot of good trade blue-collar workers. We're talking about companies that was mentioned already. We're mentioned Chief and Lindsay and companies like Valmont and Balin. They employ hundreds and thousands of Nebraska citizens. So they contribute strongly to our tax base, and they're healthy for our economy. I do want to speak, and I was grateful for the comments about E-Verify. E-Verify is really a little bit of a cleanup issue with regards to the primary purpose of what we're trying to get done here today. I think the original language around E-Verify was unintentionally punitive. It was obviously put in the regulations to encourage E-Verify to happen, and E-Verify is happening, but the fact that it was not happening within what turns out to be a very constrictive time frame turned out to be more punitive. And I did, in talking with a few folks this morning, I did learn of a couple of stories where thousands and thousands of dollars of tax credits were surrendered because it was found a file or two where the E-Verify was not done within the 3-day period. And again, we're not talking about people that failed E-Verify. We're not talking about hiring people that are here illegally. We're talking about any one of us that might have been hired, but the E-Verify process was not followed within, or was not completed within that 3-day time period. So again, no malintent by the part of the employers in any way. We just need a little bit more reasonable time frame for them to complete that important factor. So with that, happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Senator Van Gillern. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. We did have 2 proponent letters from Nicole Fox and Josh Borowski. With that, we'll close the hearing. With that, we'll open the hearing on LB 173. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chair Linehan and fellow members of the Revenue Committee. For the record, I am Elliot Bostar, that's ELIOT-BOSTAR, and I represent Legislative District 29, here to present LB 173, legislation to provide clarification and guidance to businesses as to when out-of-state employee and associate income is or is not taxable in Nebraska. Current state statute 77-2733 subsection 8 identifies which business activities constitute income of a non-resident individual derived from sources within the state. In recent years, the Nebraska Department of Revenue has begun to interpret this statute more broadly and is attempting to collect state income tax from individuals who reside out of state, but who have worked in our state for as little as a portion of 1 day in a tax year. This broader interpretation of the taxation guidance disincentivizes businesses from looking to hold events or do business here in Nebraska, resulting in decreased economic activity in our state. LB 173 provides a 30-day exemption from this requirement for non-resident employees who also perform employment duties in other states. If an employee's service in Nebraska exceeds 30 days, The entirety of the time that they were in the state, including the 30-day exemption period, would be taxable and subject to withholding. LB 173 specifically excludes individuals who are entertainers, professional athletes, or public figures, defined as a person of prominence who performs services at discrete events, including but not limited to speeches and public appearances for compensation on a per event basis. Public figure specifically does not include a member of a business's board of directors or similar governing body. Any person earning income in an excluded profession would continue to be taxed for work performed in Nebraska, even if only for a single day. In the case of a person who performs duties in more than one state on a given day, compensation would be taxable if the hours in Nebraska were more than in any other applicable state. This applies in the case of those who exceed the 30-day threshold outlined in the bill, and in the case of those specifically excluded individuals. There is also a provision which stipulates that the time a person is in transit, while driving, sitting on a train, or waiting for baggage at the airport, for example, would not be counted as performing duties in the state. The legislation also includes an adjustment to time and attendance tracking requirements in order to ease the burden on employees, employers, and the Department of Revenue. Under LB 173, an employer who makes a good faith effort, specifically defined in this legislation, to maintain accurate time and attendance records designed to allocate employee wages for income tax purposes and relies on that data for income tax purposes shall not be required to make payment of any penalties or interest otherwise applicable for failing to deduct and withhold income taxes. These changes are to avoid replacing one burdensome requirement with another, particularly for a Nebraska-based employer with many employees in multiple states. This is a necessary change so that our state does not inadvertently discourage economic investment and activity through overregulation, and so that those looking to invest in Nebraska have clear guidance regarding when employees will and will not be subject to taxation and filing requirements. I would encourage you to support in advance LB 173. I thank you for your time and consideration. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you very much. Other questions from the committee? Yes, Senator Von Gillern.
Senator Bostar, can you help me? I'm looking on the fiscal note. I'm not finding the math to arrive at the number that's on the fiscal note. Can you help me with that?
Well, I appreciate.
Or would you like an invitation to explain that?
Thank you, Senator Von Gillern. It is my distinct privilege to talk about the fiscal note. There will be testifiers behind me who will go into more detail about why it is generally understood that this fiscal note is extravagantly high. But the takeaway that I would like you to take from me is that it is extravagantly high and unnecessarily so. If you look on the third page of the fiscal note, which is labeled at the top as LB 0173, page 2. That third paragraph down, they talk about their methodology. So Department of Revenue assumes 25% of non-resident tax withholding net of entertainers and public figures as revenue foregone as a result of LB 173. DOR estimated the withholding amount from entertainers and public figures are approximately 2% of total non-resident withholding. With that sum, the estimated reduction in general fund revenues is as follows. So that's I think a critically simplistic approach to take for trying to determine the sort of fiscal impact that LB 173 would have. This, and again, the folks behind me will have far more comprehensive information. It's my understanding, actually, from conversations that at one point, I think the Congressional Budget Office estimated what this legislation would look like for the entire country, and they came to a figure of $100 million. So our fiscal office is saying that for Nebraska, it's $50 million. It's unreasonable to imagine, as entertaining as it might be, that Nebraska would constitute 50% of the nation's expenditure for a universalized approach in this legislation. Thank you. You are welcome.
Thank you, Senator Van Gillern. Are there other questions from the committee? So this would be less than 30 days. It could be different times too, though, right? It would be a total. Like,
It's within a tax year, so
within a tax year.
yes.
So if they were here for 3 weeks and then later on another 3 weeks, that goes over the 30 days.
Correct.
Okay, all right. That's helpful. Any other questions?
So you couldn't just, come here 6 days a week every week and then, say that you were-
Here's a concern that's a little cloud above my head.
Yeah.
And you don't have to answer, but what if I actually work for, I want ABC Corporation, Omaha, Nebraska, if I only come in like 1 day a week, but I go home to Iowa and I work on my computer?
Well, if you came in 1 day a week, you would go over the 30 days. So you wouldn't fall within any sort of exemption.
Okay.
But if you,
That's the one concern I have about this bill. We have to figure out that the
Sure.
people can live in Florida,
yes,
but they have no income tax.
that's true.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any proponents? I'm sorry, proponents.
Hello. Good afternoon, Chair Linehan, members of the Revenue Committee. My name is Susan Lewis, SUSAN-LEWIS. I am Senior Associate General Counsel at Mutual of Omaha, but let me begin by stating that I'm not a tax lawyer. I provide legal support to human resources at Mutual. I'm here today to testify on behalf of Mutual, the Greater Omaha Chamber of Commerce, the Lincoln Chamber of Commerce, the Nebraska Chamber of Commerce, and the Nebraska Insurance Federation. As noted by Senator Bostar, LB 173 seeks to address the issue of taxation requirements for employees who live in other states. This bill would better align Nebraska's income tax rules with the realities faced by the businesses of all sizes. Mutual of Omaha is deeply invested in drawing our workforce to Nebraska. We are demonstrating this with our expansive new headquarters project planned for the heart of downtown Omaha. However, as a Fortune 500 company doing business nationwide, we must acknowledge, especially in the remote post-pandemic era, that some of our 7,000 employees are not Nebraska residents. Without employing some non-resident workers, Mutual of Omaha could not continue to compete and grow in the current business environment. We do not seek legislative solutions that would incentivize companies to hire workers from other states. And as one of Nebraska's largest employers, almost 2/3 of our employees reside in the Omaha metropolitan area. LB 173 simply acknowledges that the modern workforce is more mobile than it was 5 years ago and includes employees who might travel and work in other states. Currently, the Department of Revenue requires withholding and payment of income taxes by non-resident employees, even if these non-resident employees work in Nebraska for only a portion of 1 day in a tax year. This makes it challenging for companies to bring in non-resident employees for meetings, training, and conferences. In fact, one of Mutual of Omaha's business divisions purposely hosts conferences in states that do not have a day one withholding requirement. Mutual of Omaha desires not only to bring those conferences and events to our home state, but also to bring all of our remote employees to visit the home office in the future. Will our employees want to come knowing that they now must file a non-resident tax return? We're afraid they won't. This bill simplifies tax withholding for employees working for Nebraska companies and makes it easier for non-resident remote workers to do business in the state. Passing this bill will make it more attractive for businesses outside of Nebraska to plan conferences that will lead to increased tax revenue, not to mention additional revenue for a variety of Nebraska businesses. The state benefits from laws favorable to Nebraska employers' non-resident employees and mobile workforces. We live and work in an interconnected mobile economy. The modern workforce isn't stationary. Nebraska is currently one of the most unfriendly states to mobile workers and their employers. Nebraska can continue its hard line on this, but employers and employees are going to avoid working in our state or even stepping into the state if we continue to tax like this. Bills like LB 173 help us continue to make Nebraska the most attractive place to live and work. For these reasons, we would ask the committee for support and advancement of LB 173. Again, my responsibilities at Mutual are human resources and not tax, but I'm happy to respond to any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Are there questions from the committee? Has this been a long-term problem, or is this something that it was the regulation change at Department of Revenue?
No, it's been a long-term problem.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Other proponents? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Senator Linehan and members of the committee. We appreciate Senator Bostar's bringing this to the committee for your consideration. I am John Oliver, John-Oliver. I am Vice President of Enterprise Applications for Interpublic Group of Companies. I'm here to provide commentary on LB 173. Headquartered in New York City, Interpublic Group is a global provider of marketing solutions with approximately 54,600 employees in all major world markets. Our companies specialize in advertising, digital marketing, communications planning, media, public relations, and specialty marketing. You may have seen some of our work recently on the Super Bowl for clients like Chevrolet, Verizon, E-Trade, and Budweiser. IPG's North American Shared Services Financial Center is located in Omaha at Belmont Plaza, where critical work to support our business and our clients takes place. Our global data center with nearly 1,000 virtual and physical servers is hosted at the Scott Technology Center. And locally, we employ approximately 470 employees, interns, and contractors. At IPG, our people are the heart and soul of our company and want to be a part of a company with a strong culture and unique value proposition that aligns with their own. The excellence of our people continues to drive our success and the significant changes taking place in our industry and the environment in which we operate. Encouraging collaboration between employees is a key part of our strategy to attract and retain talent. Because of the COVID pandemic and the advent of hybrid work environments, companies are now reviewing state laws and payroll taxation to ensure compliance. This review has raised an awareness of the day one payroll tax policy in Nebraska. Going forward, this policy will likely discourage out-of-state employees from visiting our operations here in Nebraska due to the requirement to file payroll taxes in the state after short, infrequent visits. These visits encourage collaboration between employees and allow leaders from other parts of the country and the world to work hand in hand with our local management team. These visits allow us to highlight the operations we currently have in Omaha and provide opportunity to deploy additional resources locally. For example, we have been considering hosting an IT management conference in Omaha, which would attract over 90 of our top managers from around the world. This type of event also benefits our local economy. When we host this type of conference, we fly into the Omaha airport, stay at local hotels, frequent local restaurants, and partake in local entertainment as part of the conference. Unfortunately, without a change in the regulations, it is unlikely we would host this event in Omaha. Instead, this event would more likely be hosted at another one of our locations where local tax regulations accommodate a 2-week window or more for visitors. I also serve on the Omaha Chamber's Information Technology Advisory Committee. In the past, we have leveraged events like the College World Series to encourage visits by site selection consultants and others influential in attracting outside investment in Nebraska. This bill will help ensure we're able to continue to attract these visitors going forward. Thank you, and I'd be willing to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Oliver. Other questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
Are there other proponents? Any other proponents? Are there any opponents? Oh, okay.
Good afternoon. Senator Linehan, members of the Revenue Committee. My name is Nicole Fox, and I COLE FOX, representing the Platt Institute, and we support LB 173, which would improve Nebraska's treatment of non-resident income. In today's economy, it is not uncommon for workers to find themselves working in a state for which they are not a resident for a short period of time. Under current law, Nebraska is one of the most aggressive states for taxation of non-resident income. This increases the compliance burden for both businesses and workers that might have a limited intersection with the state, and it increases the likelihood of double taxation. Ultimately, it makes Nebraska less friendly for business. For example, under current law, Nebraska has no filing threshold for non-residents. That means non-residents are liable for Nebraska income tax if they spend a single day in the state. Other states have thresholds based upon the number of days spent in a state or the amount of income earned while in a state. The compliance burden for withholding taxes and filing a tax return based upon a limited time spent in Nebraska is outsized relative to the tax revenues that would be raised. Nebraska is less attractive for businesses and remote workers with such aggressive rules. Today, it is especially important to have friendly tax rules related to non-resident income, given the significant increase in remote work, along with a gradual return to pre-pandemic patterns of domestic business travel. LB 173 would make helpful changes to how Nebraska treats non-resident income and businesses that pay income to non-residents. First, the bill would establish a filing threshold of 30 days for non-resident individuals who perform employment duties in more than one state during the year. That means that taxpayers will not be liable for paying taxes if the taxpayer spends less than 30 days in Nebraska. Similarly, the bill creates a withholding threshold for employers. Businesses are not required to withhold Nebraska income taxes until an employee exceeds the filing threshold of 30 days. Once the taxpayer exceeds the 30-day threshold, taxes will be owed and must be withheld for the entirety of the taxpayer's stay in Nebraska. It makes sense to provide a meaningful filing and withholding threshold, and it also makes sense to apply taxation to the entire portion of taxpayer income earned while in Nebraska in the case that the threshold is exceeded. LB 173 would also ensure that days are not counted towards Nebraska tax liability if the majority of the day is spent in another state. Professional athletes, performers, and public figures would still owe taxes for income derived while in Nebraska. States commonly apply different rules to such high-paid employees. However, LB 173 clarifies that public figures do not include a member of a business's board of directors or other governing body. It would disincentivize businesses from locating their headquarters and holding their meetings in Nebraska if their out-of-state board members were taxed for coming to Nebraska for board meetings. These changes have always made sense, and they are particularly sensible and reasonable as remote work becomes permanent for some employees. And for those reasons, we support LB 173 and this change to the tax code.
Thank you. Are there questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much. Are there other proponents? Are there any other proponents? Are there any opponents? Okay, guys, hustle here.
Sorry. First time.
Yeah, first time, right.
My apologies. But I do not have any written testimony today for this. I don't have any written testimony for this one. I just wanted, my name is Brian Sloan, BRYANSLONE. I'm president of the Nebraska Chamber of Commerce. I've been asked to testify on this as well in terms of the burden that this places on companies in Nebraska, and particularly headquartered companies in Nebraska. The inability to bring your board of directors to the state without having tax consequences is really difficult. Headquarters are that's not only, it's also very to our hotel, our hospitality industry to be able to bring conventions and meetings to the state. In fact, there's many I'd like to host in Nebraska among the chamber community. And the aggressive tact of potentially taxing anybody who wanted this is one of the most difficult standards within the United States, and it's not helping us in terms of either our reputation for a business-friendly state or for, frankly, building our businesses in this state. So on behalf of the Nebraska Chamber, I would reiterate our support for this legislation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sloan. Are there questions from the committee? So, if ABC Corporation in Omaha, they bring in employees for a week, they have to do a W-2?
Potentially.
But they're all clearly not doing that.
I would not say that they're not all clearly not doing that. This issue, and I think a prior testifier mentioned this. This is something that, because not only Nebraska, but this is familiar territory for, let's say, California, which is trying to tax everything that moves within that state. There's much more focus among employers now in terms of how this is taxed, and COVID actually created this. We had our own discussions in Nebraska with the Department of Revenue. How are we going to deal with now employees who were everywhere all the time? And so getting a clear set of rules, I believe I testified on this before on a very similar bill. Having a clear set of rules is really important for the employers. They can apply a clear set of rules. What they really have trouble with is a subjective standard that you don't know when you cross that line or not.
Thank you. Are there other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Are there any other proponents? Are there any opponents? Is there anyone wanting to testify in the neutral position?
Good afternoon, Chair Linehan, Vice Chairman Gillern, and members of the committee. My name is Joe Bishop Henchman, JOEBISHOP-HENCHMAN, and I'm Executive Vice President of the National Taxpayers Union Foundation, which is a tax and government spending research organization based in Washington, D.C. And it's wonderful to be in Lincoln again and meet some of the new faces on the committee. I'm going to regret saying this on the record, but by being here today, technically, I must file a Nebraska tax return next year. And more than that, and this goes to a question you just asked, Madam Chair, my employer before today should have set up withholding with the Nebraska Department of Revenue for my 1 day here so that I could remit tax on 1/365th of my income to Nebraska and then credit it against my District of Columbia income tax when I file next April. It's a lot of paperwork and a lot of back and forth to net out to not very much. I'm joined today by my colleague Andrew Wilford, who's the author of a new ranking report we have just produced, and I've provided copies for the record. And I'll let him talk a little bit more about what that study analyzed and why it found Nebraska to be second worst in the country on its tax treatment of remote and mobile workers, and how policies such as the one you're considering would be a dramatic improvement from that, from the status quo. I did want to note two things just to address some questions that have already come up on the bill. One is, with no disrespect to Senator Bostar, the language in this bill is not from him. The language is drawn from model legislation at the federal level that's been discussed at great length from the federal mobile workforce bill, both in its treatment of athletes, entertainers, and public figures, as well as the 30-day threshold, which is viewed as the gold standard. Everybody knows what 30 days is and can keep track of that. The second point I wanted to note is on the fiscal note. And I do want to acknowledge that this is hard to calculate because there isn't data on who's here however many days. I'm glad Nebraska Department of Revenue is not keeping track of how many days everyone is here yet. They just know if somebody's a non-resident or if they're resident. So it's a bit of guesswork to determine what is the revenue loss that may be associated with this. I did want to note a couple of data points that may point in a different direction, and I'll provide all these sources for the record or for the fiscal office or whatever the committee may suggest on this. Obviously, there was the hearing that was held on Senator Cost's bill last week on convenience of the employer, which is a not identical but similar attempt to solve the same problem. And the fiscal note on that one was just under $6 million. And it's kind of hard to understand why there'd be dramatic differences in approaches in those two approaches. In New York in 2014, they had a similar 30-day threshold bill, and New York analyzed the fiscal cost of that. And New York State Department of Revenue, much to the chagrin of people who visit New York, does keep track of how many days people are in the state. So they're able to come up with a more sophisticated estimate. And their estimate was it would cost the state $106 million a year to adopt a 30-day threshold. So kind of whatever proportion you want to do Nebraska to New York, I think you would apply the same thing here on whatever that may be. Senator Bostar did mention the Congressional Budget Office estimated a nationwide effect of between 55 and 100 million, and they kind of came to a consensus agreement of $78 million. That was in 2017, which escalated today would be about $96 million. And then Arkansas, which passed a similar piece of legislation, estimated the fiscal impact as indeterminate, but no more than $22 million. And again, you want to evaluate kind of how you compare Arkansas, how many Arkansas is equal to Nebraska. But overall, I think it's very, very high. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions, but I do want to acknowledge that my colleague will be testifying after me, talking more about the general policy.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions on the committee? Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Linehan and the rest of the Ranking Committee or Revenue Committee. My name is Andrew Wilford, A-N-D-R-E-W, W-I-L-F-O-R-D. As my colleague mentioned, I'm the author of the ROAM Index, which is an acronym which stands for the Remote Obligations and Mobility Index. In spite of that fact, and despite what my colleague mentioned before, I want to state for the record that I was and remain completely unaware that I am supposed to file a Nebraska tax return today. The ROAM Index is an attempt to measure the tax obligations that individuals and businesses face as a result of remote work and how states' tax policies affect that. Unfortunately, Nebraska does not score well on the ROAM Index. Nebraska is currently ranked as the second to worst state, so 49th out of 50. That's in large part due to filing and withholding thresholds, which make up more than half of the overall score under the ROAM Index. If Nebraska were to institute 30-day filing and withholding thresholds, filing being individual income tax filing obligations, withholding being employers. If Nebraska were to institute that, as well as pass similar legislation that I know has been discussed about eliminating the convenience of the employer rule that Nebraska has, Nebraska would become the second highest scoring state with an individual income tax. So, I think that this is really an opportunity for Nebraska. I think that Nebraska can turn around its score very, very quickly. And I would like to thank the committee, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much for being here. Are there any other neutral testifiers? We did have 2 letters for the record, both proponents. Senator Bostar, would you like to close?
Thank you, Chair Linehan and fellow members of the committee. For those of you who were on the committee last year, this bill is similar to the one that was brought last year. I handed out this article last year. So the article is from 2022, but it's from the New York Times. That got cut off there, but it's fun because it's, one of the times that the New York Times mentions Nebraska. It's appropriately positive. And so with that, I think that, as was stated before, there is a real opportunity here to fix this problem. And it is a real problem. And, you know, I think the fact that we are joking about the reality that exists, which is that, you know, sort of everyone that comes before us, if they come in just to testify as an expert on something here in our committee, they fly in for the day. Technically, yes, they should be filing a tax return in the state of Nebraska. They should be paying taxes to the state of Nebraska, and their employer should be withholding. That I don't believe engenders the kind of positive economic environment that we would like our state to be known for. And so we obviously need to do a lot of work on the fiscal note here. But I would encourage the committee's support for this. I'd be happy to answer any final questions.
Thank you, Senator Bostar. Are there any questions? On the fiscal note, I'm sitting here and as all of us, like running constantly, never everything. But are they saying that 25% of non-resident tax withholding net of entertainers? So they're saying that this is 25% of the non-resident income? That's what I'm trying to.
Yes.
Okay, 25%. So if I think I'm correct on this, just to go back to the fiscal office, if I own property in Nebraska and I make money on that property, I have to pay and I live in Florida, I pay non-resident income tax. Trust me.
Yes.
So we have a lot of absentee agricultural landowners that are getting rent checks.
But that would still be taxed.
Yeah, but it would be non-resident income, wouldn't it? I'm not a resident.
But they're not doing the work.
Right, but they're not resident. That's why I think maybe talk to fiscal office. Department of Revenue is just taking all non-resident income, which.
So you're saying for the way that they calculated this.
Right. They can't.
Are they taking? Yeah, I understand where. Yeah, I don't know the answer to the question about what's in this bucket that they're pulling from.
Right. Because it's all rental properties, commercial, residential, and you live someplace else, you start to pay income taxes on it.
Yep.
In Nebraska. Okay. Any other questions? All right, that brings our hearing on LB 173 to a close. And
thank you.
Okay, then we will open up testimony on LB 689 and welcome Senator Linehan.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Senator Brian Gillern and committee. I'm Luann Linehan. I represent Legislature District 39. My name is L-O-U, capital A-N-N, L-I-N-E-H-A-N. I'm here today to introduce LB 689, which amends sections of the Nebraska Property Tax Incentive Act regarding community college tax credits. The way it presently works, the Department of Revenue is charged with setting a credit percentage that is then multiplied by the taxpayer's community college taxes paid to determine the credit tax. There's an escalator of $50 million for 2022, $100 million for 2023, $125 million for 2024, and $150 million for 20. That's already in the budget because we passed that. LB 689 changes statute to direct the department to stop using a community by the taxpayer. This bill is just another step in the efforts the legislature has taken to bring tax relief to Nebraskans. I ask you to support LB 727 and AM 361. Thank you, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. Do I have AM 361?
Beat me to the question.
I'll message and have them run.
Okay. So I'm sure it's technical. This is a pretty simple bill where the state's going to pick up 100% of whatever property taxpayers pay into the community colleges in a property tax. And we headed that direction last year. So this would just get us to 100% quicker.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you. Senator Linehan. Proponent testimony, please.
Good afternoon, committee. Randy Schmazel, RANDYSCHMAILZL, President, Metropolitan Community College of Omaha, Nebraska. I'm here today in support for the Metro Community College of Bill 689, based on the increasing of the level of support and the continuing of the support. Last year was the very first year that community colleges participated in the tax credit. Before that, K-12 participated. It was well received by the taxpayers, the community college, Metro, and I'm sure the other community colleges and our businesses in Omaha. And one of the ways we figured that out was through the Truth in Taxation postcard process that we went through. And college received a number of phone calls, well over 100 phone calls that wanted to talk to us about this postcard. And we made sure, I personally made sure that we called everybody back, talked to them. And we actually made quite a few friends in that process because we're able to talk about this tax credit and actually send them information on how, although you're paying your taxes, you get this tax credit. And what we did find out is many of our citizens in the Four County really don't participate much in property tax credits. They're residential owners, so they're not business owners or farmers or others. And so they really needed to be coached up a little bit on how this would work. And so very pleased with the website we put up for our citizens that talks about this. And I'm very pleased with the Nebraska Department of Revenue property tax lookup tool that's in place. So when you plug in your parcel of your property, up comes not only your local school K-12 tax, but the community college tax. So if you're not applying for your community college tax credit, it's because you're not applying for your K-12 tax credit also. So that tied together really made it a nice package. This checks many of the boxes for our local constituents in the four counties. Not often do we have property tax relief that is a substitution of state tax for our local tax. Our four counties pay a significant amount of the state's sales and income tax. So anytime there can be a tax credit that lowers that and gives back to our local constituency, that is really a good thing. So congratulations on the legislature for pulling that together last year. It keeps in place our general fund and our capital fund concept at the college. And our general fund is the money we use to run the college for salaries and that. And our capital fund is the money that we utilize from property tax for the upkeep of Metro Community College. And we have some of the longest standing buildings in the state. It's called Fort Omaha. The buildings are anywhere from 140 years old to 100 years old. And we bought them for $1, I guess, and that I'm sure we paid too much because there's a lot of upkeep, but it's a beautiful facility. It also sets in place the backstop for safety net on state funding and a continuation for the college. If for some reason the state could not fulfill their commitment and had to lower it, we still have the other property tax to fall back on. So this is one of many tax credits in the state of Nebraska. And like I said, not always is the citizens of the Ford County area in the Omaha area knowledgeable about tax credit. So with that, I'm going to stop. And it's pretty simple support for this.
Thank you for your testimony. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, Mr. Schmeichel, thanks for being here today. Any other proponents?
Good afternoon. My name is Bruce Reeker. It's Brucereker. I'm the Senior Director of Legislative Affairs at Nebraska Farm Bureau. In addition to Farm Bureau, I'm also here on behalf of the Nebraska Corn Growers Association, Nebraska Pork Producers Association, and the Nebraska Soybean Association. My testimony is just going to be about as clear and concise as the bill is itself. It's very straightforward, and we are supportive of this. The taxpayer knows exactly what they're getting. It is probably one of the cleanest ways that we know to get dollar for dollar tax relief when made by the state. And for those reasons, we support this. If you have any questions, I'll try and answer them.
Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you for being here, Mr. Reeker.
Welcome.
Any other proponent testimony? Big chair.
It's a big chair and I'm a short woman. Thank you, Vice Chair Von Gillern and members of the Revenue Committee. I come to you today in support of LB 689. LB 689 is an innovative way to reduce property tax while protecting the statutory foundation of the community colleges of Nebraska. As stated in Statute 85-1501, the legislature hereby declares that for a community college to be truly responsible to the people it serves, primary control of such colleges shall be placed in the citizens within the local area. It goes on to say it's the intent and purpose to create locally governed and locally supported community colleges, college areas with a major educational emphasis on occupational education. It goes on further to explain the financing. The legislature recognizes the need for and importance of a strong partnership with the community colleges to assure the continued economic growth of the state. In recognition of that partnership, the legislature affirms that community colleges should be financed through a funding partnership from property tax, state aid, tuition, and fees, and other sources of revenue. LB 689 is a win-win. It honors the intent, the purpose, and the financing model to support Nebraska's community colleges and provides the property tax relief that is sought by our citizens, our legislature, and our governor. I appreciate your time today and your thoughtful consideration as you seek innovative strategies to create a tax structure for the state that supports rural vitality, economic development of all of our communities, and the creation of a skilled and educated workforce. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Before we take questions, could I ask you to speak and spell your name, please?
Oh, I forgot. The chair took over. Leah Barrett, Leahbarrett.
Thank you, Ms. Barrett. Any questions from the committee? Yes, sir. Senator Beans.
Thank you, Vice Chair, and thank you for your testimony here today. So you're with Northeast, is that correct?
I am.
How many years have you been with them?
3 years.
3 years. And over those 3 years, are you aware of emails or complaints or concerns coming from property taxpayers as to the community colleges levy?
I would say that not often, but the most concern I get is when I'm in person. I've not received phone calls or emails, but I do go out to our 20 county service area and talk about, I will talk about property tax and the things that we're doing in each of those districts.
Sure. And so there is some pressure out there. In your opinion, does the existence of this credit, has it taken away some of that pressure?
I believe it absolutely takes away some of that pressure. We talk about it just as President Schmeichel explained. We did not, we were not part of the truth in taxation postcard situation because we lowered our property tax or our levy, lowered our levy. to have a very small increase in the property tax asking that we received last year.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Any other proponent testimony? Welcome back.
I'll try to do this better. Vice Chair Von Gillern, members of the Revenue Committee, my name is Brian Sloan, BRYANSLONE. I'm president of the Nebraska Chamber of Commerce and Industry, testifying in support of LB 689 and on behalf of the Nebraska Chamber and the Lincoln Chamber of Commerce. Within our membership, it's clear what the two priorities are. It's workforce, and it's reducing the income and property tax burdens of the state so we can become more competitive. And there's nothing even close to those two. In that context, there's a number of really important proposals that have been brought to the legislature, and many of them referred to this committee this year. LB 689 is one of those proposals. It would eliminate the tax burden of property taxes levied by community colleges by expanding the refundable income tax credit ultimately to the full 100% of the property tax credit or property taxes paid. It may be helpful just to take a quick look at Nebraska Chamber's policies from an education standpoint. The Chamber believes community colleges are vital to our economic development efforts. They're our partners, and they're generally a budget priority even in hard times. Nebraska Chamber has a longstanding policy supporting the local property taxing authority of the community colleges to ensure that stability and reliability. This legislation would not affect local control of community colleges nor their ability to remain responsive to regional workforce demands. From a tax policy standpoint, the Chamber also has a longstanding policy generally opposed to mere shifts of property taxes to income and sales taxes. That said, we've generally supported property tax relief as part of larger tax modernization packages that promote economic growth and revenue growth that's necessary to support income tax reduction as well. We continued that policy, and our property tax policies also call for fiscal responsibility and efficient management of tax-funded organizations. It's important to note then that our support of this legislation is in the context of what we hopefully believe will be a larger tax modernization effort this year and education funding effort this year, with particular attention to the governor's remaining bold proposals to reduce income and property tax burdens. Perhaps LB 689 will be a vehicle that may help resolve any current differences in views with respect to community college funding. Regardless, we'll continue to work with our community colleges, the legislature, and the administration throughout this session to achieve the bold vision that's been put forth on income taxes and property taxes. And then again, perhaps this is a potential solution. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Good. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, Mr. Sloan, thank you for being here. Any other proponent testimony? Seeing none, any opponent testimony? Afternoon.
Good afternoon, Vice Chair Von Gillern and members of the Revenue Committee. My name is Joey Adler-Ruane, Joey-Adler, space R-U-A-N-E, and I'm the Policy Director at Open Sky Policy Institute. We're here to testify in opposition to LB 689 because we're concerned that it would obligate even more funds to a future tax credit without knowing whether we can afford it. Obligating additional future funds to this tax credit now, while our revenues are heavily propped up by federal funding, has the potential to force tough decisions by future legislators. We may see a drop in revenues after the federal funding ceases to flow through our economy. Additionally, if the goal is to alleviate our reliance on property taxes, we oppose a tax credit as the vehicle to do so, as it fails to address the conditions that led to the reliance in the first place. It is also a mechanism that lacks the transparency of an appropriation, which would also have the benefit of being reviewed regularly. Increasing state aid to community colleges and ensuring a sustainable revenue stream for that aid is likely to address the conditions that has led to the reliance on property taxes. It's because of these reasons we oppose 689. Happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Any other opponent testimony? Anyone would like to testify in the neutral? Seeing none, Senator Linehan, would you like to close? So Linehan waives closing. We have 6 proponent letters and 0 opponent letters and 0 neutral letters. And that will close our hearings for the